I'm delighted now to welcome Justin Lodge, Head of Developing Markets at Wiggle. Justin.
Thank you very much, James, and thank you to IMRG for inviting me today to speak to you. Thanks for the previous speakers as well. I found that very interesting. Some really good takeaways, particularly about the Chinese and Russian markets. And I'll try not to duplicate too much of that during my session. So just by way of introduction and to gauge sort of knowledge around Wiggle, can I just have a show of hands as to who had heard of Wiggle before you read this synopsis? Oh, crikey, fantastic. That's actually fantastic. And keep your hands up if you've ordered from Wiggle. And keep your hands up if you're most excited by the free Haribo that goes in the packet with it. Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty standard sort of affair. So. Yes, good morning. My name is Justin Lodge, and I'm the head of developing markets at Wiggle, which is essentially the international arm of our business. And today I'm going to take you through a little history of how we've developed our international strategy, and then take you through a bit of a case study for what it was like to actually try and put that strategy into action. So, see if I fall foul of the evil PowerPoint. Okay, so just in terms of agenda, and I'll just return to this periodically. So a little bit about Wiggle itself and the international team within Wiggle. Then talking about the process that we undertake to identify international opportunities. Then there's a section on how you benchmark your own proposition in relation to your competitors in given markets. Following from that, how to build a strategy to go after those opportunities and to maintain a competitive advantage. And then finally, a piece, depending on time, just going through the sort of key hits and misses that we've experienced as we've gone down this international road. So a little bit of an introduction to Wiggle. We are a pure play multi-sports retailer. So primarily focused on cycling, and that's what we're most known for in the UK. But we are significantly expanding into running and also tri-sports, so triathlon. And we're quite good at it. So we are we are probably the leading UK now. This is a bit of a debate as to whether we've overtaken our nemesis chain reaction. But we are certainly right up the market leaders in the UK. And globally, we are the #1 online retailer for road cycling and for triathlon. So we've been in international markets for quite a while. So the quote there is very telling. So at heart, we are a business run by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. And that's really intrinsic to what we do. So the slide here just pictures some of our fellow Wigglers going about their sort of their free time. The gentleman to my nearest one here with the USA strip is my boss, who's an ex-pro cyclist and Olympian. You have to be really careful who you go out with for a group ride when you're at Wiggle. You can get left a long way behind. And it's pretty common that there's a wide range of abilities, but it's very common that there are lots of sort of sports nuts within our organisation. I'll return to that later on. So if I can indulge in one anecdote today, I'm quite a fan of sort of anecdotes, but one anecdote which I'm dying to tell you. I've always wondered why we chose the title Wiggle. It's quite a sort of strange word, and it has its challenges when you try and introduce that to foreign markets. And I finally got the answer last week. I was in the warehouse chatting to one of our longest-serving people, and I was talking to him about the history of the business, and it goes right back to the founders in the late 90s and early 2000s. And effectively, the founders owned a mall of shops in Portsmouth. And in that mall, the two most successful shops were Butler Cycles and also a sex shop. And they decided to launch online because that was the kind of vogue at the time, and so they decided that they needed a kind of product-agnostic sort of word to describe a website that have such products, cycling products or different type of products. And so initially, Wiggle was sort of a strange mix of kind of Lycra and various bits of paraphernalia on the website. And the thing that strikes me as most amazing is that actually the cycling business was far more successful than the online sex shop. going forward. But that sort of cleared it up for me in a sort of in a quite amusing manner. So a tiny bit about myself. I'm certainly not to the standard of Derek here, but I'm a sports nut as well. So an ex-rugby player who one night got very drunk and decided to enter triathlon, and then got onto bigger and bigger challenges going forward. And I did my first Ironman last year. So I very much fit in with the kind of sports fanatics within our business. My background is retail through and through. So I joined John Lewis straight from university, and I worked through John Lewis, Waitrose, various other supermarket competitors, and joined Wiggle a year ago. So just a little bit more about Wiggle. In terms of the business itself, it's growing very, very rapidly. So there's the stat about Facebook there. We just signed up our 400,000th Facebook fan. So it's growing rapidly. This slide gets out of date every time I present it. And then in terms of the international team, half our sales on average are from overseas markets already. And that's a really key statistic, and that's why the international strategy is fundamental to the future of our business. We already have 12 websites in 10 different languages. If you don't count Australian English and American English, you could argue that's a different language. And we actually seriously do argue about that at Wiggle, whether that's a significant difference. And a very big part of my role is to build the international team. So we currently have a team of 30, and that's split across various disciplines: translation, in-house translation, customer service, which is done almost exclusively by email. We have a team of marketers, which I'll come back to, and country managers. And my next point there, our key territories for us have either have a country manager, or we're in the process of recruiting a country manager to run that business, a business within a business. And that's a key prong of our strategy going forward. So the international team has its own responsibilities, but it also works within a matrix structure within the business. So there are sort of discipline heads across the business that we feed into to get the support that we need to be successful. Okay, so this is one of the first things that I looked at when I joined the business. How do you identify the international opportunities? So I hope this slide isn't too busy for you to see at the back. I'll sort of walk you through it. So it was quite a simple exercise, but incredibly complex and time-consuming. And I'm not going to talk too much about the first sort of, the second column, as you see on this chart. So essentially what we did was look at all the countries that we serve. We currently serve around 87 countries, and that does vary from sort of month to month. And then we looked across the sort of across the top in terms of the columns, a variety of different ways of measuring how important this market should be for us. Now, the first one, market opportunity, size and growth. I think we've covered that in sort of some detail today, and there's a wealth of statistics, and IMRG are a fantastic resource to use to determine how attractive and how big the market opportunity is. The next point, however, I think it's something that often gets overlooked, and that's the current scale. So your current scale and your current growth and your current market share. So a lot of retailers get quite obsessed about the big target countries, so the US, Germany, and they're sort of almost in China, and gets almost sort of blinded by the big numbers sort of put in front of you. And I think one of the things that we've seen is that actually there's actually room for backing your successes and understanding why you're successful in those markets. And there's a couple of examples within Wiggle of that. So Australia being the first one, where we went in as basically the first mover in the market, and were phenomenally successful very quickly, and have been able to maintain that share. And also Sweden, and Sweden is on paper a much smaller market than other European countries, and yet we enjoy much bigger sales there, much higher margins, much more profitability. And that's often down to some of these other factors on here. So you look at the competitive intensity. So how competitive is it in that marketplace? Germany is incredibly competitive, particularly in our field. So it's very, very hard. So you might be shooting for a very big number, but it's very difficult to get even incremental percentage points of growth there. Next, we looked at the likelihood of gaining a sustainable competitive advantage. So how much effort, how much resource do you need to put in to be competitive in that market and to be able to continue that competitivity over time. Then this is a massive factor, and this was alluded to earlier on today, currency exposure. This is extremely important. So the pound is at sort of near record highs against a number of currencies. And our currency is exposed in different ways depending on the financial markets. So the euro being we're most tightly joined to the euro, but other currencies such as the kronas or such as the Japanese yen or Australian dollar, they are less tightly linked together, and so the fluctuations can be much greater. And this has a massive, massive impact, and one of the key considerations here is your buying strategy and how you can hedge against currencies. It can work in your favour, but it can turn very quickly and work to your detriment. So you have to be very, very, very cognizant of that fact. And then so overall, we gave an overall rating for that country, and that helps us to define what our key markets were going forward. It's a combination of those factors. Okay, so what about building and maintaining a competitive proposition? So we developed a model that's kind of like the PQRS sort of model that's kind of well established, just to try and articulate what I'm going to ban that word, how to maintain a competitive proposition in an international market. So we looked at those factors down the left-hand side and articulated them in a little bit more detail to try and really understand what that meant when you look at international markets. So very briefly, pricing. Pricing is absolutely key, but not just the best price. It's also understanding the pricing mechanics for each market. Is it vouchering, as we talked about in China? Is it sales-led? Is it new product, exclusivity? What is the hook for that country? How does your price architecture work? How do you manage that on the website? Can you do round pricing? What's the conversion? How does it work on your website? And how do you make that logical for a given country? Then there's what you sell, so the breadth and the desirability. And there's a whole host of factors around user experience. And some of those user experience criteria are very generic and are applicable to all markets, but some are very, very particular. If you've ever looked at a Japanese website, for example, it's entirely different. It's entirely different. And we would look at it from Western eyes and say, that's just crazy, it's chaotic, it's very disjointed. But that is the cultural norm, and that's what Japanese customers are used to. So you have to look at it through those lenses. Then there's a very, very important bit on service, which I'll return to later. So that's around delivery service, customer service options, etc., and payment. And these are what I call hygiene factors. And then marketing. So how do you get your brand out there? And how do you enter the digital marketing arena effectively? And then finally, there's this thing around brand affinity. And we found this really, really important. This kind of the do people love us sort of factor, which is quite difficult to gauge, but is incredibly important when you look at places like Australia that really like to support indigenous companies in competition. So how do you, if you don't have that, how do you grow that, and how do you build that within a market? So this is a very distilled version of how we go about building international strategy around our key markets. So I've built it down to sort of macro level in 4 key stages. So the first step, which is almost kind of preliminary, is switch on a country. And it can be as simple as that, particularly within the EU, which has obviously much closer legislative barriers to the UK. So just start shipping there, and just be cognizant of the kind of legal implications of doing so. Next, the sort of primary phase is to efficiently facilitate purchasing and drive traffic. And I'll go through this in a bit more detail going forward. So payment methods, currency, all those types of things. Secondly, we look at capitalising on that and build a website specifically for that country, and start the process of translation. Next, and this is for our key territories, we look at building country-specific teams. So to really own that business and drive that forward and start the process of localisation. And finally, the final kind of evolutionary step is to have in-country teams and fully localise. So yeah, boots on the ground, offices, potentially logistical solutions, everything that is required to really, to really appear and be local. So this is the slide I'm probably going to spend most time on today. This is the kind of step, those steps broke out in a little bit more detail. And again, these are very complex, and I've sort of had to restrain myself to focus on the absolute key elements. So I picked out 4 key elements on the left-hand side. So we've got payment and delivery in green. You've got what I've called voice and service in red, and then translation and design, and marketing and ATL, above the line marketing. So effectively, those first steps, so local currency, basic payment methods. If people can't pay you, you can't sell to them. And it's really obvious. And we've had examples earlier on of if you don't offer the payment methods that people want, you've got no hope there. You might as well just not bother. And that's an absolute hygiene factor. The second thing is local currency. And that is an absolute, relatively simple thing to do, depending on your site architecture. But that is a key barrier to overcome for customers. Then, typically at this stage, we would offer English language customer service support. Again, it's not optimal, but we're talking at the very early stages, but you have to have some way of corresponding with customers. And then in terms of translation and design, if we're thinking about launching a website for stage 2, this is where you would start translating the frame of your website, the help pages, all the really essential things to translate in your website so that customers can navigate, they can understand what they're getting for what price, etc., which you can then build from. So you'd have to start that process in advance before you launch the website. And at a marketing level, it's pretty low level here, so probably Wiggle brand terms, and just starting to build a steady sort of flow of traffic going forward, starting to get a bit of a presence. Moving forward, you'll see we start to look at local pricing. So that could be as crude as kind of a currency converter on your website, or it could be more sophisticated for a separate price file. Local payment methods, so building on those and start to get some of those more exotic payment methods that are so important in international markets. At this point, we'd be looking at customer service in local language. Now, for us, this is still at the email stage. And we'll be talking about feedback, so product reviews, customer feedback, and relaying those back to customers to start to build the fact that we can converse in the local languages. Added on to that, we've got some further translation. So we'd start to translate the merchandising on the website, so banners, offers, etc. And we would start to prioritise our translation on the top-selling and top-viewed products for that country. And we'll start to build our brand presence on digital marketing, and start to move into those brands and start to use translated AdWords and keywords within the digital arena. So moving forward, this is where we start to really localise. So we're talking about building up the translation levels, ideally introducing blogs and guides and really starting to grow organic traffic. And that's a key strategic plank of our going forward. We'd also look at introducing elements like live chat, if that was culturally relevant for the market, and that's culturally relevant in some markets and particularly relevant in other markets that just don't understand what it is. And we've had a few painful lessons to learn along the way for live chat. And then we'd also be looking at more bespoke return methods and delivery methods that are sensitive to the sort of market expectations. And finally, you've got the sort of full-blown local team, so an office in the country, potentially some stock in that country as well, though that's a big step. Potentially phone lines. If you're looking at Australia or Japan, you've got to look at local time zones. And then at this stage, you'd be looking at, do you change your website more fundamentally for the target country? So just to distill that into sort of Wiggle language, this is these are the kind of countries that we have at different stages of our evolution. And we're really comfortable with the fact that we've got a disparity between different countries. we are focusing on key markets. So at the top there, at stage 4, we have Australia, which has just opened an Australian office. We have service points there for people who buy bikes. We've got a press agency. We've got all this activity landed in the country. We've got a general manager who lives down in Australia, who's Australian. So that's a full sort of interpretation of our strategy in play in Australia. And in fact, there's a devolved responsibility, so Australia doesn't fall within my team. It's a separate reporting structure right up to the CEO. And the next tier of countries, so level 3, these are the countries that sort of I predominantly spend most of my time on. These are the ones where we're building country teams around. So Japan, Spain, Sweden, Germany and France. And all these are either at 100% translation or rapidly getting there. And we're spending a lot of time introducing payment methods, improving our delivery proposition, building up blogs and guides, and spending a lot of time on digital marketing and optimizing that. And then behind those countries, and rapidly growing, are countries where we have a website. It might not be 100% translated, but we've invested in a website, and therefore we have translation resource and customer service resource to support it. So those are the countries that we're trying to build to be big enough and important enough to support a bespoke country team. And then behind that, we've got countries that have a relatively high sales level, but don't justify having a website of their own yet. Some of that is because of the language, so like Canada, for example. So we can do that through the US site or through the French site. And these are considerations going forward that we might end up launching a top-level domain for those countries as well. So finally, I think I've got a couple of minutes just to talk through some of the steps that we've done along the way. So over the past year, these are some of the things that I've been involved with. So if you look on the sort of left-hand side, Klarna. Klarna is a online payment method, which is it originates from Sweden and is growing rapidly in uptake in Sweden, but also in other parts of Northern Europe, and is now stretching out across sort of Western Europe and beyond. And it's intrinsic to retailing in Scandinavian countries online. So we're integrating with Klarna, and hopefully today it will be on the site. If not today, it will be within a couple of weeks. And we see that as a massive advance for us, and we should see a big return in terms of conversion uplift and appearing local when we speak to Scandinavian customers. Similar to that, Chiara, which is now owned by UPS, and that's a collection service, and we've launched that for France, for Benelux and for Spain. And in the very first week of launching that in France, we had 30% of all orders going through Chiara and 12% in Spain. And it's just culturally accepted in France and Benelux that you have a collection option. So that's been a massive success for us. DHL Packet was a similar thing for Germany. We saw a 15% increase in conversion just by putting the logo on the website. So putting it in our USP banner, putting it through the checkout, it just reassures the customers that they have a brand that they recognise and they're going to get their parcels in time. So that's some sort of simple wins there. Google AdWords, I put this on there because we're doing a massive amount of work at the moment. Possibly my biggest focus is on optimizing all the foreign language campaigns for PPC and PLA. So we've invested in native speaking marketing managers, and they spend a lot of time optimizing our accounts. We have a 17,000 product base, so it takes a lot of time. But what we've discovered is that most of our customers search in their own language. So you need to be there with those keywords and responding to those customer queries. And then running through some of the other ones, tell me to hurry up if I'm running out of time. So blogs and guides, we think this is a really important avenue for us to explore. And this is primarily for SEO optimization, so linking to opinion formers in those countries, educating customers for how to use our products, and basically improving the sense of we're not just flogging you stuff. We actually understand what it's like in the market. We know how you should use this mountain bike and which mountain you should hurtle down in France on that mountain bike. And it really grows and really helps to get this kind of stickiness to your website. It keeps people engaged on the website. And it's a big investment for us to build that, but we should have that live later this year. I'll skip over web money, which is another finance thing, and move on to live chat. So I alluded to this earlier on. So live chat is becoming pretty ubiquitous in the UK. Most websites I've been on now sort of pops up and people understand what it is. When it pops up in Japan, our customers are scared, generally. And it pops up and they go, what the hell is that? And they close it down. And we're trying at the moment lots of different ways to kind of soften that impact, explain what it is. It's not some bug or gremlin, it's actually there to help you, and we're starting to get a little bit of an improvement. But it's just a small example to see that something that's culturally normal here might not be, and might need a bit of translation to land in that country. So we've got live chat now in Spain, and we have it in Japan as well, and we're kind of experimenting with other markets. Trust marks. So I promise I'll talk a little bit about trust marks. So this is, what have we got here? Trusted Shops, which is a great scheme. But there are others out there. I sound like a BBC presenter, but there are other trust marks available. And one of the things that we've looked at is making sure you pick the right one for the market. So the easiest way is to put a trust mark on your website that is kind of generic and can go across all your websites. But perhaps the more intelligent thing is to look at which has the most resonance for which individual market. And that might be the generic one, and in which case that's fine, but it might be a specific country one. For example, in Spain, we're probably going to go for Confianza Online, which is a kind of government-sponsored trust mark. So it might not be as simple as just ticking a box, I've done that, that's fine, that works for all my countries. You have to kind of consider that. And the final point on here is around duty calculations. So one of the complexities when you ship outside the EU is customs charges and handling fees, and how you communicate that to a customer, and the decision about how upfront are you, and do you want to scare them off at the early stage, or do you want to scare them off at the final stage? And there are solutions to help you with that. So that's one of the things that we're starting to look at beyond our key territories, is how to approach that thorny subject. And undoubtedly we'll get into a lot of kind of A/B testing and discover at what point to break the bad news to a customer in the US or Brazil or Switzerland or places like that. So yeah, these are some of the things that we're working on at the moment. I'm getting the hurry up, so my next, I'm standing between you and your coffee and cakes, so I did put any questions on there, but we've probably run out of time.
We have a couple of moments if anyone's got any questions for Justin before we break. We have a microphone, if you could just wait for the microphone to join you, thank you.
And that was very interesting, Justin, thanks for that.
Sorry, could you hold the microphone a bit closer, please?
Yeah, how's that?
Thank you.
Oh, there we go. Oh, that was very interesting, thank you. So the whole presentation was about your international expansion, and this is your standalone store site sales, I assume. Do you guys do any marketplace expansion, especially with international, seeing as it's a lot easier? I mean, we've seen in China, Tmall takes the majority, 95%, if not more, of all online sales.
Yes, it's a really good question. That's something I'm wrestling with at the moment. Wiggle is, we have our own brands. So we have our own brand, cycling range, running range and bikes. But we're predominantly a third-party brand retailer. And with that becomes problems. So that makes it more complicated on a marketplace. So if you're a Burberry, for example, why wouldn't you use a marketplace in China? It's just obvious to get out there. But if you're a third brand intermediary, it gets much more complicated. And if you're coughing up 10, 15, 20% margin for those sales, you've got to think really carefully about the kind of economics of it. So we're having a bit of an internal debate around how we do that. I think it's pretty well established, and one of the early speakers was talking about China, it being kind of ubiquitous in China. And I think at some point we're going to have to kind of man up and go down that route, but it's how to do that intelligently with the product mix and offering that we have. So yeah, we're thinking about it, but it's a bit of a frightening step for us.
Any further questions, please, Charles?
I'll just shout it out. Do you manage your customer database centrally or country by country overseas?
We measure it centrally, so we've got a central CRM function. We've got more data than you could ever wish for. We're being a pure play. We've got absolutely every bit of data. the difficulty is doing something with it and sort of segmenting that and chunking it out. But yeah, we've got a central repository of customer data, and it's massive. It's a massive piece of it's a massive piece of data.
Yes, please, back there.
Hi, I was interested, what is your approach to fraud prevention?
Fraud prevention, yeah. So it's not my area of expertise, I have to say. We've got a great fraud protection, our profit protection team within the business. So, and I think what we do, so the biggest areas of concern that we have, it tends to be Russia, China, and South America. They tend to be our key kind of hotspots. Often what it requires is one of our customer service guys ringing up the customer and just validating that they are who they are and they've placed it. That can be the kind of the final step. I'm not too au fait with the other bits that we do kind of automatically and which bits of software we use, but my team, who are translators in customer service, I know they engage in some of those kind of fraud prevention phone calls.
Okay, I think we're running tight on time. I just use Chair's prerogative for one final question, if I may. Obviously, there's a lot of talk in the UK market around different devices and mobile, etc. Are you seeing that reflected across the different territories? Are you seeing certain territories going more towards tablet stroke smartphone first rather than desktop sites?
Yeah, absolutely. We see some countries that have almost no desktop participation. They're straight to tablets, straight to mobile. That's quite difficult for a product mix. I mean, do you really want to buy a bike on a mobile? It's quite challenging for us sort of from a technical perspective to do that. So again, that's one of the things we're wrestling with, the kind of future of mobile, but there is an inexorable growth, slip away from desktop to mobile and to tablet in particular.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Justin, for your time. Thank you.
Pleasure.